Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
I'm not sure if you'll be able to hear it or not, but I've got a slight thing going on, a cold of some sort. And yes, it's the beginning of summer, and I have a cold. So, here's a story that Carl pointed out to me. U.S. Postal Service warning users against sending checks through the mail. Do not send checks through the mail. This is coming from the post office. Now, the post office is already teetering with respect to how useful it is to the average American. And so a lot of people get less and less mail these days in terms of actual analog mail. And so one of the few things that people still were using it for was to, say, pay their bills by mailing checks. And now the U.S. Postal Service is saying you probably shouldn't be doing that either. So that kind of is surprising. John Delano wrote this for KDKA out of Pittsburgh. It's a new warning from the U.S. Postal Service. Do not send checks through the mail. Americans wrote $3.4 billion checks last year, according to Federal Reserve, and many of them end up in the Postal Service to pay bills for things like, your house payment or your energy bill or something. Now the post office is warning its users, don't put checks in the mail, because more of them are getting stolen than ever. And by more, we mean a lot more. The Better Business Bureau said, unfortunately, this is something that can happen. The Postal Service reports that complaints of mail theft doubled in 2021, and banks report that check fraud jumped to 680,000 reports last year, up from 300,000. So it more than doubled. So who is stealing the checks? It's not entirely clear. It could be workers at postal distribution centers who recognize a check in an envelope, or perhaps more likely, thieves who fish envelopes out of mailboxes. So whatever you do, do not put a check in an envelope with a stamp on it and put it in your mailbox with a flag up to indicate that the mailman should come by and take it. Someone driving down the street goes, oh, there's some mail for the taking. And by the way, there's certain envelopes that obviously contain checks, like the envelope that they send you with your bill for the power company, for instance. And if you look at that envelope, it's very specific, and someone will look at it and go, oh, that's obviously them paying their power bill. So that has led the post office in some areas to install high security mailboxes with small openings that won't take many envelopes, forcing customers to get out of their cars and go into the post office. Whoever is doing the theft, data on your bank checks can be used by sophisticated scam artists who can also change the name of the payee and even the amount of the check. I've heard of somebody actually taking a check made out to the power company, walking into their own bank and saying, I'd like to deposit this, please. And the bank either didn't catch or didn't care that it was made out to, Consumers Energy and not John Smith. So meanwhile, they say this is happening in the Pittsburgh region, elsewhere. So when asked, have you heard about this with respect to Pittsburgh? An expert there said, yes, and this isn't anything new. Unfortunately, when it comes to different counterfeit checks and counterfeit check fraud, post office says if you must mail a check, avoid the mailbox and bring the envelope directly into the post office. They're saying that the box outside that you drive up to put stuff in, that's right there at the post office, they're saying that's not even safe. You need to walk inside the building and do it. If you're choosing to mail a check, it is always recommended that you use a secure mail drop, such as inside a post office, versus an unsecured public-facing mailbox. Of course, many companies now prefer that you pay online, but that has its own set of fraud issues with the growth of online payment fraud. One study found 2.5 million online transactions were compromised in 2022. So you should be paying by credit card, not debit, if at all possible, because things on your credit card can often get reversed if they're fraudulent. Debit cards, maybe not so much. Credit card method is always the safest because you have the most legal recourse and the most amount of time should a transaction go awry. The bottom line is whether you pay by check, credit card, or online, minimize the risk as best you can. So this is a crazy one because the Postal Service, if you eliminated right now people mailing checks from the traffic that the post office is handling, it would drive the volume of what they're doing down so much that it'd have to be catastrophic for their business. It's gotten to the point right now where if you excluded junk mail, I'm talking about stuff sent to resident or the person who lives at or our friends at with just the address, I'd say I get about 2 pieces of mail a week at my house. And those 2 pieces of mail are bills. And I refuse to go paperless with my bills. I know there's people out there say, Steve, get with the times. You can do everything online. I still like to someone mail me a bill. So I get the bill and go, oh, there's my bill. And then I go over and mark it on my calendar to pay the bill. And if something is being sent to me via email, for some odd reason, I don't always see all these emails. And I've become convinced that if they mail me a hard copy of something, I'm more likely to see it than if they email it to me. But that could also just be a paranoia on my part, having grown up in the day and age of paper mail versus email. Oh, boy. So, yeah, this is a crazy one. So, U.S. Postal Service is warning its users against sending checks to the mail and saying, if you got to do it, and this is the crazy part, if you got to do it, don't even go to the post office and stick it in the mailbox at the curb. Literally go inside and either hand it to somebody or put it through the slot in the wall. But the scary part is I've read several articles here to double check some of this stuff. They've actually said they're concerned it could be employees of the post office itself. So in other words, you could take your power bill, fill out the check, put it in there, seal it, stamp it, and then walk into the building, put it through the hole in the wall, and it still could get stolen. And so at that point, I see why they're saying you shouldn't send checks through the mail. But I don't know what'll become of the post office if everyone takes that advice. And I'm not saying, oh, no, let's go ahead and live dangerously just to save the post office. If they can't protect the mail passing through their own hands, they've got problems. And so I know that they had all kinds of problems during COVID where mail just wasn't getting delivered. And I did a video a while back during COVID where I actually took some envelopes and mailed them to myself with proper postage on them. And 1 or 2 of them came through way, way later. Like I'd mail them at a post office that's in the, I live in that district. And I'd address it to myself with myself as a return address and with a stamp on it. So there's only 2 places it can go and there's the same. One of them I got like weeks and weeks later. One never showed up. And I also had an interesting experience with the IRS, which sounds like a curse. May you have an interesting experience with the IRS. But I filed my taxes one year, and I have an accountant, and he filed them for me electronically. And then he said, go ahead and just mail the check in. And I understand you could probably do that electronically, but with the IRS, one interesting thing, of course, is that the date that you put it in the mail that it gets postmarked becomes the date you paid it. And so if there is a little delay of a couple days or a couple weeks, it's kind of in your benefit. And it might not be much money that you save or earn by having money in your account for a couple extra days. And it was a couple months before they cashed my check. And it may have been 3 or 4. Weirdest thing. And I don't know now, in that case, if it was tied up in the mail the whole time or it was sitting in a storage unit at the IRS. Because I heard at that time that they were so backed up and they were so shorthanded that they had mail piling up in storage units that they were getting to when they could get to them. And the good news, of course, is that they would honor the postmark. And so it's kind of funny is I got a piece of hate mail from the IRS. And it says, Dear Mr. Lehto, we understand that you've filed your return on time. That's great, but you didn't send us a check. And I called him, and I actually got a very nice guy on the phone. And I said, interesting, I did send you a check. The guy goes, well, you know something? If you sent a check, just wait. A couple days later, it cleared. So, craziness in these times in which we live, especially when you consider that I can catch a cold on the first day of summer. So there you go. Carl, thanks for sending it, but you might not want to be mailing checks at all. And so this might be the thing that pushes a lot of people to finally go, fine, I'll do everything online. But the U.S. Postal Service is warning its users against sending checks through the mail in any form. From KDKA, John Delano wrote that. Carl sent it. Thanks a lot. Questions or comments, put them below. Let's talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law. Failure is like free tuition.